As the government's demonetisation drive put the goods and services tax at risk, well, West Bengal's Finance Minister Amit Mitra told CNBC TV 18 that states' coffers cannot survive the double whammy caused by both the note ban and the GST. Now, remember, tomorrow is an all-important GST Council meeting. This is the first meeting of the GST Council after the centre made the draft GST laws public. Joining us now to discuss this further, Pratik Jain, leader of Indirect Tax at PwC India, Uday Pimprikar of EY, and Sachin Menon of KPMG. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on the show. Before I come to you, here's Bengal's Finance Minister Amit Mitra in an interview with me yesterday raising questions about the GST.
Can we face these two destabilization processes simultaneously for the common people, for the small business, for the medium business, for large business, for governments themselves? Revenue will steeply decline. I have seen a study done by Telangana government, which is not Bengal, that they will lose 20% of their revenue due to demonetization, which is 10,000 crores, and only in 4 items: stamp duty, excise matter, and few items like that, not even taking into consideration VAT.
Well, that's Amit Mitra, and his voice matters not just because he's the Finance Minister of Bengal, but also because he's the chairperson of the Empowered State Finance Ministers on the goods and services tax. So let's bring in our experts now. And Pratik, let me start by asking you. You just heard what Dr. Mitra had to say. There was an informal meeting of state finance ministers on the 20th, which was inconclusive. The draft laws are now open for public comments. You know, given the fact that demonetization wasn't factored into the compensation claims and so on and so forth, are you still hopeful that we could see a breakthrough in this session of Parliament?
Look, my heart says that it should be, but my mind says it may not. Right? Really, I think it's going to be difficult to my mind. You know, in next couple of days, they have to decide on the draft laws and on the dual control issue. I think that on dual control issue there could still be debate and disputes. I don't think they have still worked out a model as of now. But if the draft laws are passed and then presented to the Parliament, you know, the government doesn't need opposition to get it passed right now, right, as a money bill. So hoping against hope. I mean, we are hoping that, you know, tomorrow and after at least the draft laws will be approved by the Council and it will be presented to the Parliament in this session.
Yes, I mean, you know, we can't say that it's a done deal because demonetization has clearly turned this now much more into a political negotiation than ever before. Otherwise, the GST Council was functioning very, very smoothly. But, you know, even a day is a long time in politics, so maybe towards the end of the winter session we could see a deal go through. But on the draft law itself, Sachin, let me ask you for your comments on that. 28% rate being capped as far as the IGST is concerned, and 14% under the CGST, an anti-profiteering clause as well, an authority to monitor anti-profiteering. What do you make of the draft laws? What to your mind are the highlights?
Well, I think the draft law is a mixed bag of surprises as well as relief. Many of the negative provisions which are currently there in the service tax law, which they have missed in the first draft, they brought in here. Like they are taxing intermediary services, they are brought up some of the cases where if the service provider and service recipient is located within India, has a disadvantage as opposed to one of the service provider or service recipient located outside India, which means that they are discouraging business in India. I don't know whether the government thought through all this, but one point I want to make with respect to the comments that the demonetization will derail the revenue and therefore state will be at loss. You know, we should understand that the agreement is already reached on the compensation policy.
Compensation,
and the base
yes.
year of compensation is 15-16.
Yes.
Yeah, and it said that they will take into consideration a 14% increase year over year. And therefore,
yes,
demonetization reduces the revenue. It doesn't impact the state once they implement GST. Because
a valid point. I'm just going to fix your audio, Sachin. I'm just going to fix your audio, but that's a valid point that you make, because the compensation bill does talk about payment to states being benchmarked at 14%. That's the assumption that they're making in growth of revenues, and they have guaranteed compensation to state governments for a period of 5 years. But Uday, let me bring you into this conversation, since you know, the next 2 days are going to be crucial as far as finalization of the draft laws are concerned. Sachin was just pointing out some of the misses or red herrings perhaps that the government ought to address. What would you like to put on the table in terms of issues that should be addressed by the GST Council to ensure that we do have a much more robust law?
So, I'll like to possibly comment on the earlier question one. One is that this entire experiment that we are kind of going through as a GST Council requires a huge amount of cooperation between the central state governments and between the state governments inter se. And occasions like this will keep on coming up. And how does GST Council deal with these occasions? It will be interesting to see. I mean, this is the epitome of cooperation between all governments, and I'm very much kind of interested in understanding what happens in the next couple of days. But that aside, on the law itself, I would think that there are some positives in terms of some amount of clarity that has been brought in some of the provisions. But there are some. So, for example, the treatment of imports, and in case of imports, the imports would be liable to a tax under the customs legislation. Okay, but even in that particular provision, they should have possibly aligned the liability to pay IGST for all transactions related where even the underlying matter is a product or a good to the import. So there are some bits of gaps even there, but one can see the intention, one can see the movement towards those kind of provisions, and it at least appears that the movement is towards the right direction. Having said that, there are certain other provisions that have been included which could have been easily avoided. And those are actually replications of provisions which are existing in the service tax law. I don't think that there was really a requirement to suddenly come up with a provision which deals with international transactions differently vis-a-vis the place of supply, I mean related to the place of supply vis-a-vis domestic supplies. The present law under service tax has a major problem, and again as an example and as an illustration, present law has a major problem on the treatment of international ocean freight. And the industry is crying hoarse, saying that this kind of a levy, and today service tax was made applicable in the last 6 months on import ocean freight, right? And that actually amounts to double taxation on the same amount by the central government, because that particular amount gets liable to charge on the customs tax. So those kind of things were clearly avoidable.
Generally an improvement, but there are generally an improvement, but there are still several issues that need to be addressed. We hope that will indeed be the case. But Pratik, coming back to you now, as far as the cess aspect is concerned, you know, they do talk about in the model law a cap on the cess itself. You know, take us through what you would expect there, because this perhaps is also going to be one of the contentious issues that will be discussed.
No, I mean, you're right. Right from the day one when the cess proposal came in, we have been saying that it's not a good idea. Cess should not be there at all. The only encouraging thing which I find here is that they are giving you a credit of input cess against your output cess. So at least while it is a multi-point cess, it will not lead to cess on cess, so to say. So that's the only encouraging thing, but we don't have clarity as to what are the products on which cess will apply. Of course, cess has been included for computation of GST, which is expected, because any other taxes other than GST.
Actually, we do have clarity on what the cess will be applied on. There's eight items that the government has clarified that the cess will be imposed. You know, pan masala is one of them, aerated drinks, luxury cars. So we do have clarity on where the cess will be applied, but not exact clarity on the quantum of the cess itself.
The point I'm making is that Article 270 of the Constitution gives them power to impose cesses. Okay, once they notify the cess, they can increase the list. I mean, so cess. I mean, was just hopes that industry raises the voice against cess, and hopefully that is dropped. We are not very happy about cess being levied on any product for that matter.
The number one concern that you would like beyond cess that you would like addressed?
Two concerns. One is on anti-profiteering. I think there should be a rethinking. I think it's very complex to administer. If you look at Malaysian example last year, if you look at Australian example, it has not been successful anywhere in the world. Should be relooked at. And second is the manner of taxation of service sector. I think there's a lot to be desired there. From where do I need to raise an invoice? Where do I pay tax? There are basic things which are not clear for insurance, for banking, and for many sectors. So I think that's very important aspect to be addressed.
Sachin, let me give you the final say then. Prateek has put the anti-profiteering clause on the table as something that the government may want to review, or the GST Council may want to review. And also, he believes that some of the earlier issues that we had to deal with services have not been resolved yet either.
Yeah, I think what I am finding is that whatever representations are made by various industry associations, which could have been accommodated within the revised draft, which was perhaps not done. Many of the provisions are amended. At the same time, some of the new provision brought in, which is creating more confusion. For example, now earlier it was very clear intangible was falling under the service definition. Now the revised definition is deleted that word of intangible. And I would, whether it is design or default, this kind of inclusion or exclusions which are otherwise giving you a positive clarification is removed. I doubt that this create a lot of duplication in the future.
Sachin, I think we've got you on a bad line, but we're out of time on the show, gentlemen. We will, of course, reconnect with you tomorrow. Remember that all-important GST Council meet starts tomorrow.